This is the White Street Loft, New York, 2004. If a street had seasons, White Street was early spring, too colorless, hardly sentimental, no budded touches, nothing risen but March, secular and cruel. To think she had lived on this street for almost 2 years when the plan had been to rent the loft for 6 months. Meanwhile, look around, buy, get permanent. Ah, what was she doing? Shaking her bag for the sound of her keys to get into the loft quickly. The space was dark, though known, and she ran through it to where the oven hood shone holy. Weirdly overheated, she ran cold water over her wrists. Too much excitement, she said aloud to herself, and felt the water sting and wondered if, when Ned came home tonight, she would tell him about Clyde Harris calling. But why do that? Gee, remember G, but this was different. G was no more than a punk girl in a bed set, whereas Clive Harris, well, Clive Harris was older, established, a painter with a following. He came from money and had kept it. Think of James Merrill. James Merrill, a patrician poet of the last century, a relic, a classmate had said, although Isabel found him attractive. Those artists with their attendant wives, partners, mistresses, muses, observing summer's gyre in inherited homes on islands and coasts. That was the sweet life, wasn't it? James Merrill in a documentary wore a white bathrobe, or was it a kimono? The taut chords in his thin neck pulsed when he spoke in his aristocratic voice. To admit to being transported by the sound of his voice, was she elitist and out of date? Maybe, probably, but why tell Ned of Clyde except to stir in him some feeling for her as at the beginning when anything was possible? Then, if he so much as caught her staring at him, the book she was reading no more than a fan, he often put down his own book and went to where she was sitting and put his head in her lap. Relief, not to be hungry at all, but rather pleasantly distracted by the body's other parts. Nipples, for instance, hers prickled. And she touched herself and leaned into the corner of her desk, and she played the way she remembered as a kid, skipping little words over the placid future. Ram, cat, slut, cunt, rubbed against the corner of her desk. If Clive were only a woman, was a thought that was pleasurable. Clyde Harris blew at his coffee and looked at the mess on his daughter's plate. First time together in New York since Ben's wedding last year, and already Sally was glum. He said, "There are people in the world who love you, Sally, and want you well and happy." Sally said she was fine, really she was fine, and she smiled and sipped water and turned the crust of her pot pie into crumbs as she described her day thus far. A grotesquely crippled French woman from Algeria had shared at the meeting the astonishing fact that she could not drink water straight. Water by itself made her sick. She couldn't stand the taste. The French accent made her story more convincing. Also, the French woman had a beautiful face. There was Arab in it, but no legs to speak of, little stumps in corrective boots. However could she have had babies, Sally asked. I mean, I wonder. And she looked at Clive. Terrible, she said. Sally was changing doctors and medication again. It takes about 6 weeks to get happy, Sally said. And she pulled her sweater tighter and shivered, although the diner was warm and served jolly food, comfort food, most called it. Pot pies, meatloaves, creamed spinach. Alas, no good desserts. And Sally cried. Clive handed her a handkerchief. You know what it is? What? He asked. I need to sit under a sun lamp for a couple of hours every day. Sally, Sally. Shaped like an egg, warm, brown, and large, he wondered at her AA meetings and cripples. Why should it be but that she was ungainly, shy, unsure, a girl, a woman really, a woman with some talent, his daughter, and quite alone but for sharing her problems with strangers? Something about Sally there was, the will to fail, or did he mean flail? Headaches. He didn't want to know about headaches or pills and sun lamps and whatever the hell it took to get happy. Clive almost wished Sally drank. Ned was in Boston, or so he had told Isabel when Clive came to the White Street Loft. He came with chicken soup and wonky cheeses packed in grass, the Easter basket kind. Wasted on you, he said. I know your type. What was it reminded you of me? She asked him. He had been thinking of her. He wanted to paint her. She would have time alone, too, to write. She could stay in the Bridge House. But your daughter. The Bridge House is mine, he said. He described an old house, barely furnished, the kitchen counter, tin and patched in places. There is no bridge. My wife Dinah made up the name, the Bridge House, for a house without a bridge. Our own house doesn't have a name. We've a stone wall, a barn for me to paint in, and Dinah's garden. Why are you smiling? What about your wife? What about Ned? Why do you think I would do this? She asked. I don't know, Clive said. Most people I invite say yes. Noisy moths battered the barn light in her brain as he talked about firefly season, not to be missed, and the light, especially in the afternoon. In the late afternoon, he described the way it turned their bedroom pink. Why are you telling me this? The phone rang and rang and rang until the answering machine clicked and they heard Ned saying, "This should make you happy," before Isabel muted the machine. I'll find out later, she said, and it won't make me happy, I'm sure. But be happy now, Clive said. Come sit next to me. I'll be quiet. In Clyde Harris, she had found a new album in which to put any picture she wanted. A white pitcher of cream on a round table covered in a checkered cloth, two skinny French park chairs unevenly settled on the pebbled path. Where was this? France, Spain, Italy, France, Nice, nice. To say nice seemed cornball, but that was Clive to her. I am not nice, he said. He was thinking of Sally, poor Sally, and the drab adjectives he used whenever he spoke of what she was but might have been, an only, lonely daughter. I am one of those, and Ned is an only too. Maybe that's why, but she didn't finish, humming as she was with her arm held out and Clive petting it, talking his way closer. He held her breasts, assessed what parts of her there were to be assessed, unbuttoning, pulling her shirt off her shoulder. Let me admire, he said, and he looked for what seemed a long time, and she looked down too at a small, lacy triangle of a brassiere, a cocoa-colored whiff of lingerie. Clive's hand against her collarbone. She took it up and put it against her face and smelled him in a brandy fume of sensations before his hands against her head guided her downward to disappointment. Why did it always end like this, with that musty part in her mouth? Ah, he said, finished. You wish it could be more. I don't know. I know, Clive said, using his shirt as a towel. He left, not long after. He left, saying nothing more of Maine but that he wanted Isabel to know he was, as ever, her admirer. He would like to paint her. Water runneled down the windows, or else lights jiggled in the wind. Something streaked the view. Her eyes burned, and she hated the sky, starless, cloaked, low, wet, cold. Oh, what did she have to be sad about, really? Ned was surprised when she told him about the bridge house and Clive. The bridge house on offer was free, a free house with a view of the ocean. Usually it was Ned who gilded their lives. Now the bridge house, not far from but out of sight of Clive's, was situated on the coastline by itself, so the ocean was unobstructed. The mutable Atlantic matched the sky. I'm his muse at the moment. Does that surprise you? It doesn't surprise me. You should see the look on your face, Isabel said. Clyde is happily married, she said, and a part of her believed it true, and that she, Isabel, was no more than a passing thought. But might not Ned see her worth in Clive's eyes? You should come with me, she said. The bridge house, summer. The unmanning memory of the clam box on the dock, that lidded, sunken, mossy place, hurried, humid, steaming tubs of shellfish, small orange light. It was here they all sat 2-3 nights ago. Don't, Isabel had advised Ned behind their menus. Don't what? Oh, to hell with it. Do what you want. He had shown off. Good schoolboy, having done his homework and up to date on Clive's opinions, full of praise for de Kooning, first-hand, deep, and clear. He, Ned, wanted to be intense, like de Kooning's colors, and intense, intensely himself. Homer, Marin, the muddy sea, and why not? No doubt he was a bore. I really can't remember a fucking thing, he said. Ned had been all right until he saw him. Ned had muddled the face of the handsome old man, Clyde Harris, high color and white hair, hair curled over his collar, puffed out, sort of wild. The hair and the faded clothes Harris wore and the way he stood made him out to be unusually hardy at 70-some years old. How had Ned forgotten this man, Ben Harris's uncle? But Ned had been looking at Phoebe. Didn't everyone look at the bride? Now it seemed everyone looked at Clyde Harris, the best known of well-known painters on the peninsula. Sure, showy, famous. Famous? No. Isabel was wrong about that. The tourists didn't really turn around to see Clyde Harris. Clive Harris and his wife, Dinah, just behind, in frantic colors, passing. I hope we had fun, is the best Ned can do, standing behind her. He unties her bows. After he has unbraided her hair, he tries to braid it and then unbraids it again. Isabel says, you could do more than hairdressing. But it is hard to sustain his interest here in the bare room they have found for themselves. He said, we should do it. We should make a baby. Poor Ned. His favorite words these days is fuck, though he can't do it. Fuck. What's the matter now, Isabel asks. Common as a kitchen cut, her question starts a fight. Did I blow it? Ned asks. What do you care? You were in no hurry to be liked. Please, Ned says. I wasn't entirely uncharming, was I? No, you were very flattering about Clive's hair. Please. No, Isabel says. I mean it. He decides to believe her. What else? Isabel says, you are fine. Turn around and tell me you mean what you just said. Perversely, she doesn't. Fuck off, Isabel says. Why do you even bother getting out of bed? Just before she leaves the house for a walk, Isabel's manner changes with his, both of them chastened by what? You should come with me, Ned, she says. Take a walk with me. It's a pretty cemetery. No, he wants to think of pleasanter times. So does she, but uglier thoughts intrude. The chocolatey laxatives she chewed after every meal, cracking over a hole in some Italian hill town, while Fife and Ned drink under an awning sagged with rain. Why did her thoughts wend this way? She is here, now. Look up. The oaks in the seaside cemetery rattle. The sky is near. Here. With these sleepers, how easy it is to fall onto a path that should be familiar but is not. The seaside cemetery will never be known entirely. Today's new names are Zilpha Means and Isophine, Helen at Rest and Minnie. The last two are small stones. Minnie's has a rose, Helen's nothing. Zilpha Means is buried with her husband under a 12-foot obelisk. Isophine is all by herself, a name on the stone, separated from family, a child. But whose? Isabel's maiden name and her professional name is Stark. Born is sometimes socially expedient. Thus, Dinah must think of her now as Isabel born, and what is that but a foolish heart, speared on a pike of the wrought iron fence are gouts of melons, watermelons, squashed troughs for flies she years to see. Kid mischief must be, mostly no one's here to hear the steady lobsterman at sea coughing through the fog and brush fire blue before first light every morning. Lobstermen, because this is still a fishing village. But there are also, count them, 3 art galleries, a few bric-a-brac shops, the trade winds, and an older grocery that sells liquor. Across the street from the older grocery is the town hall, and up the street the high school. Most of the town is white. The darker, waterlogged-looking places, watering holes like the Clam Box, are on the dock. A small post office, very friendly. A library, 2 banks, the famous Wish Nursery, 2 competing hardware stores, the Bay Bookstore, and the other one for tourists that sells puzzles and calendars and toys. A town the way a town should be, straightforward and simple as Grover's Corners, with an historical society and historical sites, homesteads, deeds, seals, the picture of Amos Weed's funeral, June 1895. A windowed box of smoke on wheels, a horse-drawn summer hearse posed before the open gates of the seaside cemetery. The horse looks nearly dead himself, though the coachman sits upright. Someone there is, always brave. Thank you.